Welcome to 3D View, one conversation, three different perspectives. I'm Lamondre Pugh.
I am David Perez.
And I'm Richard Strice. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome to another episode of 3D View. Today's topic, we are going to be talking about information integrity, information or data integrity, and the importance of that, and how altering the integrity of information can dramatically change or shift and have severe ramifications. And we're going to talk about this certainly as we've seen as a nation here in the U.S. and certainly the world, the effects of this over the past number of years, culminating really during this past U.S. election, presidential election. That's now ended, and I think it's important that we talk about how the integrity of information, news, and the transmission of that data and information is passed on, and how we as a peoples engage with it and react to it, rightfully or wrongfully, and so that is that's sort of the framework of the discussion. And so I throw that out to the floor, and get your guys' input.
Yeah, I think that this is such a timely topic with the rise of social media becoming more and more popular platforms to get information from, and the fact that everyone can contribute to it. Everyone and anyone, regardless of credential, regardless of background, regardless of motive. Anyone can put anything that they want out there. And honestly, because of the speed at which information moves now, it can really have a major impact, whether it be real or not, whether it be verified information or not. People have a tendency. It almost reminds me, well, if it's on the internet, it's true. And of course we recognize that that's not the case at all. So I think that this is a really important conversation to talk about the how pervasive it is, number one, but also what we can do to protect ourselves and to protect our communities and protect our society against falsehoods. So great conversation to have. Let's go.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me how we are in an age of information. We're creating information like crazy. Everyone is able to put things out there and tell people what they feel, what they see, what they have studied, what their research is, and people can agree or disagree with it. But the problem is that having so much information available at the same time for everyone tends to become exactly what we're seeing. People tend to go with what they agree with. The things that they agree with most are the things that they are going to be sharing and commenting on and getting to be more popular. And that makes it validated, right? In a sense, because we are validating that information that we're getting because we agree with it. So it doesn't have to go through a rigorous process of peer reviews or anything. If we agree with it, we're going to share it and we're going to make it viral if we can. And if we're able to do that, then we are creating misinformation, even if we are doing it for a good cause, right? In our last episode, we were talking about the future of work, and there's a statistic that is rolling around and everyone has heard it about 90% of kids that are going to school are going to end up in jobs that didn't exist. That statistic is based on nothing. If you go and backtrack where it comes from someone's idea of what could happen in the future, but it's not based on real data. And we have viralized it in a way that everyone knows that statistic now. And that's happening in a conversation about the future of work where it doesn't have a real impact right now. But what happens when that starts happening in conversations really important, like vaccination, like healthcare, like politics, and all of those other things.
Right. And we've seen it. We've seen it start to happen in conversations about vaccinations. And honestly, whether or not you agree with this particular perspective or not, but if you remember, I guess about 7 or 8 years ago, there was this huge conversations about how vaccines, childhood vaccinations, could contribute to autism. And if you remember, that was a huge topic, and we saw record drop offs in terms of parents who were getting their children vaccinated. But then you also saw a huge uptick in diseases that were thought to be eradicated coming back and really doing damage. So it shows really, it really shows how out of hand these kinds of things can get really quickly, and how they can have real devastating results to a society.
One of the interesting things about that is the concept of opinion versus fact or data, and the blurred lines between that. It seems that what social media has given the ability for is for an individual's opinion, if propagated enough, now becomes a fact, and that can be extremely dangerous if a popular or dangerous idea becomes so viral and so accepted as a commonplace or fact, then that can have serious ramifications and distortion to a functioning society, and that, I think it's that blurring of lines, because one thing that we've lost is clearinghouse of information, because there are so many of clearinghouses. So let's look at news organizations, and the typical or traditional network news organizations or newspapers. They used to be sort of the official clearinghouses because, David, I think you were saying before we started, editors sort of helped be curators of that information, fact checking, and making sure that when they printed something or when they talked about something, that it was based on some set of tangible facts. And they took the individuals in those positions took their role extremely seriously, because they knew the importance of what they were doing and the ramifications of what they were doing. You add social media into, nowadays, and the immediacy that all of us have in our hands, to be able to amplify a single opinion. And if there's enough individuals that accept that or adopt that or buy into that opinion, that now becomes the new reality or the new fact, and that's done without necessarily by individuals without necessarily the same level of responsibility that individuals who curated that data, and curated not as in generating it, but individuals who dug into it to examine the validity of that information. And that's something that we've seemed to have lost the ability to do as a society. Some of these news organizations, they still do that, but it has become so diluted because of the over magnification and bombardment of information that we get from other sources like social media.
Yeah, it is really interesting how social media happened and it was the greatest thing, and now everyone's starting to see the problems, right? Everyone's starting to see what could happen if each one of us was their own editor, in a sense, of what they get as news and as facts, basically. And I don't think that it's a bad thing completely. I think that it's a good thing that you're able to find the things that are interesting to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because at some points there are topics that have been completely erased from history because they were not talked about, and people have been excluded from conversations. So opening that door was a great thing, but how do we start to keep integrity in information, as we are creating more information now than ever before. It's really hard, and it's gonna get harder. But I think the natural evolution of this is gonna be people being able to make those decisions themselves without editors having to tell them what is wrong and what's right. There has to be, I really have to believe in human beings being able to do that, because if we don't get there, well, it's going to be a dystopian future, to say the least, because people are going to segregate more and more and more and more, instead of being the future that we hope for, which is more inclusive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that you've made a really important point. This is like a new frontier. This is a newly discovered land that we're exploring, that we're walking into, that we're inhabiting. And here's the thing: we're going to live here. We're going to live here. So there is a tremendous amount of possibility. There is a tremendous amount of optimism. There is a tremendous amount of hope. But then the flip side of that is it's the wilderness. There's a lot of wild things out there that could eat you and wants to eat you and absolutely tear you up. So we've got to figure out how do we keep the freedom that this new frontier offers and the ability to self-distribute that this new frontier offers, but how do we keep it safe? And how do we keep the integrity there? How do we make it a place where truth can really reign? And it's interesting because it does swing both ways. Because I think about how it was social media that showed the murder of George Floyd to the world. And the world reacted to that. Now, here's what's interesting. This is nothing new. This has been happening over and over again. We saw it back on video with Rodney King. Back in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know. I honestly don't know if the rest of the world saw that when the Los Angeles Police Department brutally beat Rodney King over a simple traffic situation. But we saw that broadcast then. And yes, it had an impact in the U.S. However, it did not result in systemic change. But now you fast forward some 30 years later, and you see a man brutally murdered. And even if you took the commentary away from it, if you took the interpretations away from it, what you saw was a handcuffed man being murdered. And it was social media, and it was the ability for people to share it and move it out there that really woke people up, that really helped people to see, hey, this is something that's been happening. So without this incredible thing of social media, it would not have been possible to see that and begin to right those kinds of wrongs. Now, the flip side of that is that it's also through social media that we see this bullying thing just go in areas that you never thought an elementary school or middle school or high school bully could go. And we've never thought that things that we saw as kids, when I was a child anyway, things that we saw as childish kind of antics that really never had a real impact on your trajectory as an adult. Now, this stuff really is now, and it really can. So again, it's the new frontier. It's the Wild Wild West over again, and we've got heroes and we've got bad guys. And the thing is, how do we secure everyone so that they can have a piece of it? And I guess that's the question.
I think the answer lies, as in everything, in education. I think we need to educate the world in how to deal with this reality, because there's a science called epistemology, I think, that studies how we create knowledge for ourselves, right? And the idea of that is that we start from our own perspective, from what we know is from what we create knowledge and from what we gather knowledge. So everything that you see, Lamondre, you see it one perspective, and that's basically what this show is based on. Lamondre's perspective, Richard's perspective, and my perspective is completely different because we have different realities, completely different realities. So starting from that and then moving forward to now that you know that you're creating knowledge from your own reality, that you're looking at life through your lens, try to gather more lenses, try to get more perspective, try to understand the world from their perspective so that you can see what you are doing and how it affects each and every individual. And that is the only way that I see that we can start to maybe create a reality where people are able to discern a little better what's wrong and what's right with the information that they're creating and socializing.
Yeah, I think certainly we each individually have to sort of become the clearinghouse, right? We each have to take on the deeper understanding and responsibility of when we put something out, especially with the intent that it is meant to to stir people emotionally, an emotionally charged statement. We have to have some level of responsibility as to how we use that, so that we can be better stewards of not only just good citizens, but also making sure that we don't run into the problems that we have seen, certainly exacerbated in more current months, but building over the course of the past 5-6 years, leading to this. With the freedom comes responsibility. Yelling fire in a crowded theater goes beyond just freedom of speech. It's just a really bad thing to do because it creates all kinds of problems and
Unless
sort of
there's a fire.
and that's unless there's a fire, right? Exactly. And again, that goes back to that integrity of the information, right? If the information is true, well, then it's true. But if it's not, it can create absolute chaos and mayhem. And I think that's sort of where we see ourselves, is because there's a lot of alternate truths. Now, that's not to say that some individuals who are saying this have become absolutely convinced that, what they're seeing is a reality. So from those individual standpoints, it is fact-based. But how did those individuals get to the point where they believe that is a new reality? That is the systemic problem that we've built up to this point in time, which is why social media certainly has exacerbated this. But that I think sits on top of a much of a larger issue culturally, and now I'm going to speak just in the U.S. of suppressed feelings, and not necessarily being true or genuine to oneself. And for whatever reason, social media has allowed what has existed to come and be more normalized and become a new reality. And I think that again comes down to the responsibility we each have of making sure we understand what we're reading and what we're seeing.
Yeah. I think, David mentioned the best way to really start to move this is through education.
Awareness. Mm-hmm.
And bringing the different perspectives in and respecting those different perspectives and actually hearing them. But I think that is, and I think that is one of the major challenges, because we have actually started to develop a world where your perspective can be your own and you don't have to hear anybody else's. We've created these echo chambers. We've created these silos where anything that's contradictory to what I think and what I'm saying, I can absolutely 100% unequivocally block out and don't have to hear it again. Because let's face it, many of the algorithms are written in such a way that it just feeds me what I'm eating. Whatever I'm eating, that's what it is. If what I'm eating is spaghetti, you bet not dare try to slip some corn in there, because it won't get in there. It'll get blocked out right away. And so that's a part of what we have to build against as well, is allowing those other perspectives. Because here's the thing, and I'm with you, David. I'm an optimist all the way through and through. I believe in us as well. David started the show off with, I believe in us. And I do. But I think that it's important that as we build through this, that if we can get people to see different perspectives, if you can present a different perspective to me and I actually see it, if I can get you to see a different perspective, I believe we'll consider it. But it's awfully hard when what has happened is other perspectives have not been just looked at as a different perspective, but it is looked at as an enemy. It is looked at as a bad thing to see and feel and think differently. There was a point where we could disagree and still remain friends. One of the biggest things that I saw this, and this has become a thing. It was the moment where Kamala Harris gave a fist bump to Lindsey Graham, and people were like just bugging out about that. And I'm not here talking about the merits of that, but just the concept of, because people absolutely disagree on multiple levels, that you shouldn't be civil at all.
And I think that's exactly one of the challenges that where we find ourselves right now, is that opinion is so polarized that there can't be, if you don't believe what I believe, you are wrong. And the idea that there can't be more than one perspective, I think that is absolutely at the fundamental root of what's wrong, is that people have gotten to the point where any other opinion is obviously wrong, just categorically. And that, again, a broader awareness, a broader understanding of the fact that there are other points of view, and that being able to have an open dialogue without necessarily being so impassioned about your stance that you're blinded to any other potential idea or concept. That is something I think that we, as a broader population and as a global population, really need to stand back and say, you know what? Yeah, maybe there are some other ideas or maybe other opinions and that I should listen to. And the challenge is that social media, because of exactly what you were saying about how social media silos the info, it creates bubbles that we get into, and social media is to blame for that, because that's how they, through their advertising algorithms and so forth, this is a necessary thing that was in theory originally created to be helpful for us, because if we looked at X, Y, and Z, we got ads of X, Y, and Z. And if we said X, Y, and Z, we got ads of X, Y, and Z. So that's supposed to be helpful. Well, of course, that can go all the way. What could possibly go wrong with that, right? And that's what we're seeing, is that everyone is only seeing what they want to see, because that's what's being fed to them because of how these mechanisms are set up. So some of it is external and some of it is internal to ourselves as to how we propagate this. So I think what's critical is that we just take a stand back. We all stand back and take a broader look at what everyone is saying and truly try to understand where and how and why the other person is coming from a particular position or a particular stance, and try to understand that and see where there is potential for common ground, because there always is. We all live in the same country. We all, we all drive the same sort, we follow the same traffic rules when we're driving. There's a lot of commonality that we all agree to. And there's no reason why ideology doesn't have to be so horribly polarized that that it's absolute. And again, I think that's sort of how and why we are where we are right now.
I really want to go back to several things you guys said. The power of education is such that it can change completely how we do
Absolutely.
things, right? So we know that a few years ago, the LGBTQ community was completely marginalized, and there was no way that you could talk about that. But we were able to educate people into accepting that there were different genders, there were different people with different preferences, and that became mainstream, right? What Lamondre said then was that even though we are here now and think these types of things are happening, that there was a time where we were able to disagree. I think that time where we were able to disagree and still remain friends was a time where you were able to disagree with someone, but you knew that the status wouldn't change. Status quo would remain the same. What happened now is that everything or any minority group or anyone can create something that generates actual change really fast because of the fact that we are living in a social media reality where everything starts moving. So now you have to be more protective of your status in society. And that's what started happening. And that's why people are so defensive about their point of view or their own reality. And the last thing I wanted to say is that even though social media is the problem and they are the culprit, I think that they were only catering to human beings. Because we have always been in bubbles. We have touched outside at some point, like we created churches, we created social groups, and those social groups don't mingle around with many other social groups. So that inclusion doesn't exist. We need to see the world how it is, right? We need to see that we as human beings tend to silo ourselves with people that agree with us. And social media just magnified that. And the fact that social change is able to happen now as fast as it can made us scared of change. So now we're scared of opinions because those opinions can really turn into a reality that's different from the one that I like right now.
Yeah.
So we need to start there. I think we need to start by making people understand that other people are people and that change is not bad. Change is good. And if we do that, if we change for the better, I think people are going to start listening better because they're not going to listen if they're listening from fear.
Right. And I think that that's the key point right there, particularly about the when we say, we used to be able to disagree and still kind of remain. And you brought up an excellent point. Yeah, because, that disagreement didn't necessarily mean that anything was going to change. And so there was no fear in change. And the truth is, when we wrap these conversations, when we wrap these opinions or these different opinions in fear, that's exactly why it then becomes an enemy. This is why that opinion and that person then becomes the enemy, because they're changing the way that I live. When the truth is, if you're not a part of that group or a part of that opinion or a part of that, it may not necessarily, by and large, change the way that you live. It might not impact your life at all, unless for some reason there is power that you derive from staying the same. And I think that is what makes it scary. That's what makes it scary. The fact that if changing means that my life is better, but then you're threatened by me having a better life, you're going to do everything in your power to make certain that change doesn't happen. And I think that is what we've been saying. And of course, the way you bait that and you get support of that is by amplifying the fear. Is by saying, and they've done this. This has been done for years. This has been done for centuries, for decades. That if you give these people, the right to buy property or the right to vote or the right to live free in the community. They're coming for your daughters.
Right.
You know, you're gonna have and this is a totally unbased, unfounded fear. And we do that. I mean, you can swap out whatever example you want to. X spots the mark. I'm gonna put it that way.
Right.
In terms of what diversity, what marginalized group goes in that point. But the truth is that is something that's been happening over and over again. And I think that because change is happening and we're seeing some of the differences, we saw a recoil to that as well. We saw that pullback, and we've seen it amplified in politics. We've seen it amplified in business. We've seen it amplified in so many different areas of our lives. But I think that what you said, David, is so important, is that we have to continue the education. We have to continue to push. We have to continue to open the doors up. And what you said, Richard, the idea of fostering that understanding and trying to understand where that opposition is coming from. But now here's the thing that I want to be really clear on. I do seek to understand. I do seek to understand the perspectives that people who don't want this change to happen are coming from. But I cannot allow that understanding to stop our momentum forward. I cannot allow me trying to protect and validate someone to stop the momentum forward, because we know that if we don't strike while we have momentum, the change stops. There is no change.
Well, I think one of the most important things about any civilization is forward progress. And as soon as you stop the ability of change or adjustment or innovation, you have stagnation. And we all know what happens. Stagnation is just, it can't... nothing in nature, civilizations including, can't survive with stagnation. The other thing I think that's really important about the idea of opinions and us sharing information. I think it's critical that as what we've seen is human nature, in that playing to the fears of human nature. This goes back all the way to the ancients, right? As a method of controlling of populations and peoples and so forth. So it's baked into how we're hardwired and programmed as a species. You throw fear in the mix, and now that becomes an extremely powerful way of controlling or motivating. And so, going all the way back to the ancients, this is something that has just been a common theme in methodology, and it's no different today as it was, 1,000 years ago. So that's sort of interesting. What has changed is, and David, you pointed this out, is the idea that in previous generations or periods of time prior, pre-social media, is we did silo. But those groups were a little more organic in the sense that they were still human contact groups. So when you went to church, you were going to a church, but there was a lot of people, and some may have agreed with you, some may not have agreed with you, but you were involved in conversations, so sort of rounded, that had rounded or organic opinion processes and development. One of the things, and I say church is just an example, it doesn't matter, a social group or what have you, any group, the fact that you were dealing with human interaction meant that those conversations were much more organic and very analog in the direction as to how they were approached. They could have been broad, they weren't necessarily so razor specific. And I think one of the things that social media has provided is allowed us as individuals to get extremely laser with our opinions. And so you don't necessarily have that sort of broader, rounder, more analog approach to a conversation. They can be just so digital. And I think it's interesting, the use of analog and digital in the sense that we're talking about vocal and verbal personal interaction on an analog process, where, we're using digital processes that becomes very digital in regard to our opinions and the topics to which we talk about. So as a result, those those opinions that are formed using that extremely narrow or very laser-like, very refined or pinpointed application of opinion and information can create fields of distortion for individuals that stay within that, as opposed to being able to have that's certainly more rounded, well-versed, and as a result of that more analog interpersonal relation conversation, there is some education and awareness that can happen more organically in those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I think about the whole digital and analog thing and the change and the resistance to change. And, I think it really is about coming back to the fact that we're all human, that we're all people, that we have freedoms, and along with those freedoms become responsibilities. And we have to own up to all of that. We have to own up to all of that. And I think that through education and through the realization that, no one is going to think the same always, every time. And if you think the same way always, every time, one of you is not necessary at all. And I think that is a part of the growth. That is a part of where we are. And even in this brave new world, with technologies that foster the spread of information much faster than ever before, the spread of ideas, the spread of interactions, that we really have to look at this as a serious responsibility and really begin to not only police ourselves, but also hold ourselves accountable for what we put out there and what we say. And I think that as we do this, we'll begin to find that integrity in the information that we share, integrity in the data that we ascribe to, that we'll see those things begin to rise again. And I still believe that even though it's the wild new frontier that we're on, I still think it's an incredible frontier. We just got to massage it to get it to where we need it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, everything is cyclical, right? And so there's no progress without some level of experimentation. And sometimes those experimentations are successful. Sometimes they're not so. But we learn from them and we move on and we become better as a result of them. And and I think that's what's so wonderful as we as certainly as a nation and as a global people, we have proven time and time again that given time we figure it out. And we are better than we were moving forward. And so it's messy. It can be a messy process, but I certainly have extreme hope and very positive outlook on where we're going. All right. Well, with that, we'll leave on that more positive note, and we thank you again for listening, and we'll be here the next time.
Thanks for joining us this week on 3D View. Make sure to visit our website, ruglobal.com/3dview. That's ruhglobal.com/3dvu, where you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts or join our YouTube channel so you will never miss a show. While you're at it, if you find value in the show, we appreciate it if you would leave a like or comment or simply tell a friend about the show. That would really help us a lot too. If you would like to join our conversations, you can join our Facebook community, 3D View, 3 Perspectives, 1 Conversation.